1994 marks my 50th year in the outdoor show business. My first job was with Cole Brothers Circus in 1944. And 46 of those years, I've been operating sideshows. I was with Rogers Brothers Circus in 1948. I was 17 years old, and Cy Rubens had some problems with the sideshow manager, and he asked if my partner Harry Leonard and I would take over the sideshow, so we did. So I can actually say I ran my first sideshow when I was 17. That was in the spring, and later on that same season, we left Rogers Brothers Circus and jumped out west with a carnival called Freers United Shows. And at that time, which was the standard deal with the carnivals, they furnished all the equipment, and we had the sideshow there. And so I operated my first carnival show also when I was 17. In fact, I had my 18th birthday that summer on the Freers show. Over the years, I've done many different things, not just sideshows, but this is a documentary about the final sideshow, so I'll stick with the text. I owned my first sideshow when I was 21. I was with Norman Anderson's Wallace and Clark Circus, and I left the show towards the end of June and jumped to Oklahoma and bought the sideshow off of a defunct carnival, the Greater Rainbow Shows. And so actually from that time on, I owned a sideshow. Buying that first sideshow in 1951, we continued to enlarge it, but I really didn't know anything about the carnival business. I grew up around the circus, and it's as different as day and night. And I didn't know where to go or really how to operate a carnival sideshow, so I didn't do too good. In 1954, I went with the Royal Rapinski Circus with the sideshow, but even though it was a beautiful show, it failed, and it closed on April 2nd in Leeds, Alabama. Returned to the carnival, jumped down to Pensacola, Florida with Al Wagner's Cavalcade of Amusements, the railroad show. 59, I had a very sizable show with a 200-foot banner line, and had a good route of fares, did good business. Then in the winter of 1959 and 60, I worked for Sam Alexander in the sideshow in Honolulu and Hilo, Hawaii, Maui, with E.K. Fernandez Circus. Following the circus in Honolulu, I had got a contract with Nate Eagles and went to Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey at Madison Square Garden. And I started what was a wonderful 8 years association with Nate and the Ringling Show at Madison Square Garden. The only reason the sideshow ended, I think, was because when they tore down the old garden and there was no place to put a sideshow. By 1973, we had the last really big sideshow that was ever presented anywhere, and that was for the Ringling Show in Washington, D.C. at the Armory, because that was the year that there was the circus war between Circus America out at Capitol Center and the Ringling Show at the Armory. It was, I believe, in 1974 that we built a special sideshow and took it on to Vargas Circus. 1967, I had gone into partnership with C.M. Christ, which started the great expansion for us in the carnival business. But it also, I have to attribute it to the fact that many of the old sideshow men were retiring at that time, and we started buying up their shows. I had a small show, which in 1967 I sent to Canada on a route, and we bought the show from Dude Steinmetz, and had it been on the Degler shows, and went to the Gooding's $1 Million Midways, and was there with Hal Eifert and Milt Kaufman for many years. It was with the purchase of the Steinmetz sideshow and the beginning of my partnership with C.M. Christ that the sideshow business for us really started to expand. In a matter of a few years, we bought out Bill Chalkis' sideshow, Don Hepburn's sideshow, a sideshow from Dick Best, We bought out Pete Cortez's big sideshow. And somebody said one time to me, do you want the only sideshow in the world? I said, no, I just want all of them. But actually, what it was, these were all wonderful operators. And by buying them out, we prevented other people from securing those shows and continuing their operations. And we were at the enviable position that going to the showman's convention, we could stand in the lobby and the fair operators, the carnival operators would come up and say, can you come and play my fair? Can you come and be with my carnival? And it wasn't a question then of where we wanted to book. It was a question of who were we willing to turn down. The sideshow we bought was just a few years ago, and we bought the Kelly Sutton sideshow, which had been operated by Mrs. Sutton after Kelly and Whitey Sutton had died. Our peak in 1976. That year we had a sideshow with Circus Vargas. We had a sideshow for Ringling at the Circus World Park in Haines City, Florida. We had a sideshow playing big state fairs with the $1 Million Midway, and we had another sideshow playing independently, hopscotching around at big state fairs. We had a big carnival illusion show, which was like a sideshow, only instead of having human oddities in there, they were all illusions. It was being managed by John Friday. We had 9 single O shows, you know, like Fat Man and Snake shows, things like that. We had a big illusion musical show in Mexico called Magic on Parade, starring Vince Carmen, and with a lot of circus acts. And then we also had a tent vaudeville show in Canada that year that was operated by Dick Johnson and his family. And I spent most of my season on airplanes flying around from one to another. So I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, so we started cutting down. But the last few years, since 1987, the sideshow has become more and more less of a live sideshow and more of a museum. And today we have about 200 museum artifacts in the show. And the time has arrived that the sideshow business has come to an end. I mentioned before we used to have a 200-foot banner line. Now I'm lucky to get 80, 90 feet. The business today with the carnivals is all big, noisy rides. You can't bally live anymore because the noise of the music on the rides is so overpowering. You can't stand out there and get people to listen to you and talk to them. The costs of operating are more and more, and we held out to the very end, I think, because over the years, the big girl reviews, the minstrel shows, the monkey shows, the trained animal circus, the wildlife shows, the motorcycle thrill shows, on and on. All those shows disappeared from midways, and the sideshow was the only one that was able to exist for a while. Now it's come to the point where we had the last big banner line show, and now we're closing that, so there'll be no more. And I think also, of course, part of the problem is when I got into business, when I was 17 and left the circus and went with a carnival, they furnished all the equipment. It was all brand new. They gave me all brand new equipment. They transported it. All I had to do was provide the attractions, and I paid the carnival 40% of the gross and kept all the inside money, which we had various things inside at that time. And today, if you wanted to operate a sideshow, you'd have to invest a minimum of $150,000, and you'd have to have all that money in front because you have to build a show. There's no factory that you can call and say, send me a sideshow. And if a person has money today to invest, you could take $10,000 and go call one of the big ride manufacturing companies and make a down payment on a ride, and you're in business. So that's one of the reasons why there are no more sideshows. Also because with the back-end shows, instead of paying 40%, they furnishing the equipment, they transporting it. Now, the starting price for percentage for shows on fairs is 50%. Some of them go up beyond 70%. You have to furnish everything to transport it. You have to pay all the costs. You have to pay for gate passes for your people to come in and go to work every day. Even though they don't see the fair, they still have to get into the fairgrounds if they're living in hotels or something. Trailer rentals. Years ago, I can remember staying out all winter with the sideshow, a couple of years, because as long as we were on the lots, we didn't have to pay trailer rent. If we closed, we had to go in a trailer park, we had to pay rent. Today, it's not unusual for a carnival or a fair to charge $300 or $400 for 2 weeks to park a trailer on the lot. We pay oftentimes $150, $200 to park our house trailers each, and then have to run our own light plan in order to have lights at night after the show's over. So all these things have attributed to the end of the sideshow era. Circuses, of course, haven't had sideshows for quite some time. The last sideshow the Ringling Show had under canvas was 1985, when Chris and I had a sideshow under canvas with the Blue Unit, and we played Kansas City and St. Louis. They used it as a special promotional tool. And there are no more sideshows with circuses, because today people are so oriented to time that they come within 15 minutes of when the circus starts. If it's advertised to start at 8 o'clock, they start coming on the lot at 20 minutes till 8. The doors are open and the people go right into circus. Back in the old days, people used to come out early. They'd mill around. They'd see the things on the circus, and the sideshow opened 1 hour before the circus started. In fact, in the old days of the railroad shows, with Cole Brothers, with Daly Brothers, they never opened the ticket office. They never sold a ticket to the circus until after the first opening, the first ballet on the sideshow. After the first ballet, they would open the ticket wagon. But then you'd make a second ballet, and they never opened the doors until after the second ballet of the sideshow. But that had to be eliminated because of time. I remember as a kid, we used to go downtown to see a movie, and you'd say, you'd been reading the newspaper to see what was on. You went into town and said, oh, look, the Bijou's got this, Ronaldo's got that, the Paramount there, the Orpheum. Well, let's go see the show at the Orpheum, okay? And you'd buy a ticket, you'd go in, you might come in the middle of the movie. And because of this, there's a saying, that's where I came in. Because when you saw the last half of the movie, you stayed, you saw up to the point where you came in, and then you'd leave. Today you can't do that. A movie won't even let you in except at the start of the movie. If you want to watch television, you can't watch the middle of the television show and then see the ending of it and then see what the first half of it was again. You got to see it from the start. Everything today is, people are oriented to time, and so the same with the circus. They're oriented. The circus is advertised at 8 o'clock, get there at 15 minutes till 8, and go in and sit down and see the circus. A sideshow cannot exist unless the people are there in front of them prior to them going into the circus. So the whole era has changed. No more sideshows, just as there are no more medicine shows or minstrel shows or showboats, rep theaters. These were all wonderful forms of entertainment, and they had their time. Repertory and the sideshow is the same thing. I had a wonderful time in the sideshow business. I loved it. Wonderful, wonderful people I worked with over the years. But now, it's over. Oh, I'm very fortunate. And they had us gather together, a lot of the former people who worked for us and other people that are still in the sideshow acts or do sideshow acts. And we gathered them all together for one last final performance at the close of our 1994 season. And that's what you're going to see in this tape today. You're going to see the final sideshow.
This way, we're going to have a free show right here in front of World of Wonders. the world's largest fairground circus sideshow, the largest show of its kind in all the world, and we're going to entertain you free right out here on the front stage. We're going to have the fire eater entertain, the lady sword swallower. We're going to introduce some of the unusual people. First of all, let me introduce to you Mr. John Mia, and watch him as he eats and breathes the fire. John Mia is the artist of renown who has painted all of these paintings that you see here in front of the World of Wonders show. He is the most famous of all of the fairgrounds artists working today. Ladies and gentlemen, watch John Mia now as he swallows the flame. And in our show, you're going to see him eat and breathe fire and flame, and he will drink burning gasoline like you and I would drink iced tea. In addition, you're going to see Mr. Mia take a steel nail and drive this 20-penny spike into his head with a hammer, yet he does so without feeling pain or suffering injury. Here today you're going to meet Lady Diane, and right now we're going to have her swallow the sword. The one she's holding has a 22-inch solid steel blade. Before Diane swallows the sword, I'd like to introduce some of the other people who, along with Diane, will entertain you in our show today. Here you're going to see Diane swallow swords, sabers, bayonets, keyhole saws, corkscrews, ice picks, screwdrivers, screen door springs, stove pokers, curtain rods, and clothes hangers. And you'll see John Trower swallow a lighted neon tube. You'll be able to see the light of the neon shining from his lips to the pit of his stomach, right through his body. Today you'll meet Pooh Bah, the little midget man that you see holding the snake here. This snake is a 6-foot South American boa constrictor. He can't bring one of the big snakes out here. It would be too heavy for him to hold in this on this stage. But in the show today, you're going to see him perform with a giant Burmese python snake, about 20 feet in length, that weighs over 200 pounds. It is so powerful it could squeeze a horse to death. You can imagine what it could do to this little man. Why, if he'd lose control of it even for a few seconds, it could crush him as quickly and completely as if you stepped on an egg. Here today you're going to meet Zenobia, the bearded lady. This woman not only has a beard, but she is an accomplished juggler and will entertain, taking life and limb in her very hands, juggling sharp machete knives. We want you to meet Dick Brisbane, the Penguin Man, so called because he was born without any legs. His feet, his ankles, are directly connected to his hips, so that when he walks, he waddles across the stage like a penguin waddling across the polar ice cap. And in our program, you'll see that Dick Brisbane entertains even though he has no arms or hands like you or I, just fins or flippers like a penguin. Today you'll meet Lorette, the tattooed lady, a lady who is completely tattooed with 287 famous works of art in her flesh. She has paintings representing all the great artists of the world tattooed in her skin, making her truly a walking, talking human art gallery. You'll meet the famous Trowers, John and Alexandra, in their daring knife-throwing exhibition. John Trower will throw hatchets and knives all around Alexandra and will even throw the knives at her while she's spinning on a revolving board. Here today you'll meet Mike Wilson, the illustrated torture king, a man who is completely tattooed from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. And not only is he completely illustrated and tattooed, but he's going to take a large nail and drive it right through his tongue with a hammer into a board, and showing you that he is truly the illustrated torture king. The biggest attraction in our show, I think the biggest attraction in the fair, is Harold Huge, a man who weighs 712 pounds. And my friends, that is a lot of meat with no potatoes. Harold Huge is so big, so fat, it takes 4 girls to hug him and a boxcar to lug him. And today in this show, you're going to see that he measures 109 inches. That's over 9 feet around the waist. He is a mountain of human flesh. A man who is bigger around his thigh of his leg than most men are around their waist. And when you see Harold Huge dance and get that mountain of blubber in motion, you'll swear he must be filled with jelly, 'cause jam don't shake that way. He's not married, girls, but he's willing to be, and he'll make some lucky lady a fine husband. He'll provide his wife with lots of shade in the summertime, keep her nice and warm in the wintertime, give her lots of good, heavy lovin' all the time. The big show is ready to start, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the last circus sideshow entertaining in the world today. Tonight is our very last and final performance. So if you miss it tonight, you will miss it forever. So don't miss this big show. It's something you'll be telling your grandchildren about many years from now, when such shows as this are only something you read about in history books. The world's largest fairground show, the Circus Sideshow. It's ready to start right now, so hurry along, don't miss it, it's showtime.
Jim?
Forsyth, Missouri.
Forsyth, Missouri. Do you remember how you happened to get into show business?
Yeah, it's on the circus came to town.
Which circus?
Burner Brothers.
Burner Brothers. And what happened? How did you get with the circus?
Well, I went down to visit one day, and I wanted to join out.
And you got a job.
Right.
What did you do first?
Wash dishes in the cookhouse with Josephine Silverlight.
Is that right? How long did you do that?
About 3 days.
About 3 days. How old were you at the time?
17.
17. And then what did you do after that?
Went on the big top.
Went on the big top and learned how to put up tents.
Right.
You've been putting up tents and so on, and driving semis all this time. You're in the business considered quite an expert. If this show was to close, what do you suppose you'd like to do?
I don't know.
You could always go out and drive a truck, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And if they formed a permanent museum, I'm sure you would continue there, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you married?
No.
No? No children?
No.
Just happy?
Right.
Have you worked with other shows besides this one?
Yeah, go for Davenport.
With and
Alan Hill.
Alan Hill. Well, when you was with Alan Hill, you was with Chris, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. The year that he managed that show.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Showtime. Laurette's busy knitting, as she always is. Bobby and Chris were telling each other stories about magic while Ruth and little Pete patiently listened. Outside in the shade, Bruce and Diane and Dickie were relaxed. And Mike came on the scene just then. I said, Bruce, introduce yourself to Mike. He'd never guess you're the fat man. You'd never guess that Mike was the tattooed man. So they did. And then, of course, Billy Gleason. He's one of our good men, and he's out getting the front ready. Then a little closer to showtime, the people are now in wardrobe, getting up on the stages, ready to go. Johnny Mia and Joan came up from Florida to do this show from Gibsonton. And all these people, we were so fortunate that they would come and do this show for us, came from all over the country. Houston, Alexandra from Houston, Texas. Bobby and Ruth Reynolds came from New York City on the way to California. Dickie Brisbane came from California. Laurette came from Louisiana. And Petey, of course, was with us, as was Bruce and Diane.
I want you all to come in as close as you can. I want you to touch me. I'll tell you why. I do an act that nobody believes. I like that. Before you leave today, each and every one of you will leave. I'm going to start by giving you this little sword. This sword is exactly the very pit of my stomach. When I stop, it will be touching, and I can actually feel it. I warn you, sometimes a bit of food may come up. So if you're weak, leave, don't look.
Somebody's better off going down.
Now, one sword is good, but I'm a little bit hungrier than that, and I want to do a couple swords for you. So I'm going to look at my boards, and I'm going to get the biggest, fattest sword that I have. Are these big enough, ladies? You like them? Now at this point I ask for just a little bit of quiet, because if these should scissor, open up, it would actually cut my insides and I might lose them. So bear with me for one moment while I line them up.
We should be far enough away from the circuit track so we work the rest.
Felt great. Now the sword is folded up some way. What can I do to prove it's real? I'm going to invite you to look right down into the very pit of my stomach. Next, I will swallow the sword out of my hand. Check it out. Make sure it's real. And afterwards, this young man is going to help me pull the sword right out of my throat. Are you ready? Who wants to touch it now? Anybody at all? You, sir? Thank you very much. I hope you believe me. Thank you.
Where are you from?
Hi. Well, I'm Lady Diane, and I've been swallowing swords now for many years. Since 1978, I'm very proud to have been taught by the very wonderful man, Francis Duran. I never intended to learn sword swallowing. I ran away from college in 1978 and joined the carnival. He invited me to join the carnival. At the time, it was a little bit hard to find women that were willing to travel, but what would be considered the hardships were a pleasure to me. It never bothered me. And Francis and I became good friends. Really, I saw him as a wonderful man, sort of elegant, grouchy, terrific. I totally was in love with Francis. He asked me would I like to learn sword swallowing, and I never thought about it, but I said yes, I would. Of course. So rather than going back to school that fall, I continued to be a student of Francis's, and this very day I used many of his swords. So I'm going to take a lot of pride and pleasure in it. One day I will pass it on to someone else who I feel I want to pass it on to. The one thing Francis told me is to give someone that you really care about, and I respect that, and I will do that for him. Photography is like visual things, the moment. Unlike the video, I guess the still moment fascinated me, and I've always, I think meeting Warhol in the sense that Summer made a comment that really gave me a lot of peace. I've always thought a photographer was in some ways a nosy person. He told me she's so nice to photographers because whatever a photographer stores in pictures will have stored value down the road at some point. And I thought that was a really beautiful way of looking at it, and I really thank him for giving me that self-respect and stuff. My hope, one thing I've been working on is a project where I swallow swords and photograph people with a wide-angle lens off to the side, laundromats, Pacific Islands, the Times Square in New York, anywhere. And it's sort of an ongoing series of people pulling the sword out of my throat. Hope to get back on the road.
In your photography, were you influenced by Diane Arbus, who obviously was also fascinated with the sideshow?
Interesting you should ask that. People, when I was in school, compared me to her, and yet I never heard of her. I'm like, okay, you know, Diane Arbus. And no, never had seen her work. Admire her a lot. Sorry she committed suicide. I'm grateful that I share her name. Sort of a little treat.
Thank you very much.
Hudson County Fair, and a man named Frankie, whatever his last name is, I forgot. But he was the sword swallower on the Woodhall show, and he saw me coming down the midway, and he said, "Oh my God!" He said, "Come here, Ward, quick!" Ward went over to the valley stage, and he said, "Look, see what's coming down the midway." And Ward looked. Ward said, "I gotta have him." And so Frankie went like this to me, and my friend Dean said, "You don't want to go over there." And I said, "Yeah, I want to see what they want." So I went over there, and I had a nice little chat with Ward. He invited both of us to the show, because I was going by myself. And Ward asked me how would I like to travel with him. I said I would try it for 1 week, which the next fair is Fargo, North Dakota. I said if I didn't like it in Fargo, I'd go home you'd forget about it. He said, okay. So, I've been with him ever since.
That's 34 years ago.
Yes, but I worked for Ward. 1960 is when we went to Hawaii. You acted on Ward's show. And I've been with him. And I retired in 87. So that's the story of Ward Hall.
There wouldn't have been a sideshow. What probably would you have done?
I would have sat in North Dakota on welfare on my hind end doing nothing. This way I got to see the world. I got to see a lot of beautiful places. Got to travel, but I liked. And I made a nice career and I made a lot of money on it.
House in California after you was under it a while.
Right.
And as I also recall, you bought a ranch in Nevada. Do you still own your ranch?
Yeah,
The
but
final sideshow. What do you expect to do now?
go back to Bakersfield, sit on my hind end, watch TV, push the Ward. And I started off with $60 a month, a week. It kept going up and up and up. And I asked for more raises.
You got him?
And I got them, with no question that. There's one thing you can believe in Ward. His word is his bond. If he tells you he's going to do something, he'll do it. He'll stick with it.
And are you really going to hold me up for $900
Yes, I am.
a week?
I sure is.
That's what I said.
That's what you said. That's what you got to stick by. As long as I work for Ward, I've never signed a contract with him.
We were at the carnival riding a roller plane. And I said, I believe I'll go join this thing. He said, you ain't got the guts. I've been gone 61 years. I haven't wrote him yet for a ticket to come home on. Up and joined the carnival. I got tattoos. I thought they were great. First thing I got was 2 little stars, one on each foot, a red one and a green one, stop and go. And I said, well, I says, just like an old drunk. You take one drink, he's lonesome. You take another one, keep him company, they get in a fight. You take another one to be a referee. After that, you don't care how many you get. So I had started to working as a dancer in a girls' show. Got too old to do that. And I said, well, I'll just finish up what I started. And I'll be the tattooed lady. And I know I can work as long as I'm able to climb a stage. And when I get too old to climb a stage, they can pick me up and set me in a chair and I'll sit there all day.
And how did you join Hall & Christ?
Sideshow. Kelly's Sideshow. Up in Little Rock, Casalda jail. And when we got out of jail, I had no place to go because I didn't know where the rest of them were. I had a tattoo that was infected, and they didn't think it was just a tattoo. They thought it must have been something else. So they kept me 3 days later and turned me loose. I didn't know where the rest of the show was, so I started hitchhiking, and I went to Tulsa. And it's where I met Ward Hall. I had on the belly and a pair of elastic tights and a tiny bikini, a bra, out in the front of the show where everybody could see. Ward would beat the drum and I'd dance the hoochie coochie. And we'd get a tip and then we'd turn it. The show in Dallas. And my husband was working for Pete Cortez. And I said, there's a better place than this, so let's take off. And we did. And we went to Hutchinson, Kansas, and joined Ward Hall, E.M. Crist. I was there from 1960 to 1992. So when we went home and retired, and we've been there ever since.
And would you say that your years in the sideshow business were profitable, worthwhile?
Oh, absolutely. I wouldn't have what I have today if it hadn't been for Ward Hall.
Describe your home in Louisiana to us.
I have 2.5 acres of flat land. I have a 3-bedroom home. I have a chain link fence all the way around it. I have planted about 12 plum trees and about 6 peach trees, and 3 blueberries, and 2 black walnut trees, and 3 apple trees.
Tell us.
I have a circular drive, and I got some black pots that I had bought different flowers at the nursery, and they always come in them about a gallon pot. So I have 75 of them sitting around my circular drive. And I have beautiful flowers in them. And I never have to water them. They're artificial, but they're beautiful. In the middle of that circular drive this fall, I'm going to dig a hole and plant 6 elephant ears.
Do you miss the sideshow?
I don't miss the sideshow. I miss some of the people tremendously. I think in all of my years of being on the road, I only had one boss that gave a darn about his people, and that was Ward Hall. He cared more about his people than he did about anybody else.
The Chinese garment on the back of my left leg took 3.5 hours. Now the dragon that is started on the back of my right leg is approximately 2/3 of the way completed. So therefore I am still in the process of being covered. Now the prices of tattooing being what it is today, I considered myself very lucky because I was married to the tattoo artist.
Very easy props for this one. A common, ordinary nail. You can inspect that. Thank you. No, go ahead. Take a look.
Oh, my goodness.
It only hurts when I giggle. Known as mind over matter, where there is no mind, nothing matters. Fettuccine Brothers, do not copy this material.
And we want to tell the children who are watching this show today, he is experienced, so do not try this at home.
Nutty as a fruitcake. There we go. And there we have the 20-penny spike driven all the way to the back of the cranium. Usually Johnny Mia, and among other things, a sword swallower, fire eater, circus clown, and probably best known as a banner painter. Sideshow banners that many of you have seen in front of the fairground sideshows for many, many years. Currently live in Tampa, Florida, and I was born and brought up in Bristol, Connecticut. Right now I'm doing a variety of things, and when I leave here I'll be going back to my studio in Tampa to paint what else, more banners. As far as what I'd like to do, I'm planning a college tour, collegiate tour, that'll be an exhibition of not only the banner painting, but a sort of a pictorial essay of the sideshow business, an overview, if you will, of the sideshow business, and embellished by the many acts that I do, as well as painting the banners that we described. Thank you very much.
When did you first come to work for Hall and Christ?
Came to work for Hall and Christ in 1980, I believe, and following the very first year of the Smithsonian show, and worked for Hall and Christ off and on about ever since.
How did you get into the show business, the sideshow business, and the show business to begin?
How did I get into the show business? When I was 8 years old, I was if you will, a child prodigy artist, and I did portraits and caricatures with my dad, who was a very famous cartoonist, well known, and we had some mutual friends in the circus business, so when I was 14, I spent a summer with Hugo Zucchini, the famous human cannonball, and although many people don't know this, Hugo is a very well-known artist, very proficient, so I learned some of my earlier art training was through Hugo Zucchini. That would have been in 1952 or 52 probably, on the old King Christiani circus, long ago enough that we're still doing a street parade.
Thank you.
No, that was when I met Johnny before you did one of your big road shows, because my first husband, Art, did a lot of prop work for you and plexiglass work, and we all became good friends, Johnny and his lady at the time, and Art and myself. And my husband, Art, passed away in '85, and we went out to dinner a couple of times that first year. And he went on the road, and we started writing letters. After he came back in town, after about 6 months, we started going out, asking me to marry him, and one day I think I surprised him real well by saying yes. That was after about 2.5, 3 years, and I'm a psychotherapist at Florida Mental Health Institute at University of South Florida in Tampa, Florida. Very much what I do. I enjoy coming out occasionally on the road with him. I kind of like it this way. You know, I miss him when he's out of town. By the time he comes back in off the road, we're both ready to start the married life all over again together. And
keeps the romance hot, huh?
Yeah, sure does.
Thank you.
Minnesota. Hoopa. I do the iron tongue right there. I do the fire. After that, the snake was about 6 feet long. Had the show about 42 years. So I joined the show in my hometown in 1954. And I've been with it ever since. And I stayed as long as I can, till as long as I live. And my friend and I in my hometown took me down to the show, and I joined Mr. Ward Hall. I was doing the clowning, I was taking tickets, and doing a lot of ballet. A lot of people don't recognize me. I was clowning in the show. Another one wants me to go in the show, I told her that I want to stay with him. I told my mother I'm going to visit my sister in Fargo. Oh, my show's going to be there. Such in Fargo. Talked to her that week.
What did you do?
Well, I saw the fair in Fargo. And I told her to visit the show that week.
You going to work for the show then that week?
I did the show that week. Yeah, I told her. Now, I asked her, I want to go on the show and they hear him. I wrote my letter to my mother, and I want to still stay with him. Spencer Harper and the sheriff come looking for me. My mother asked the sheriff to come and see me. Okay, I was okay. I told her again, I want to go on with the show, stay the rest of the season. That was okay. Work, do the comedy, and dancing, and shows. I do a novelty act in the nightclub.
Places you have been, where did you like the best?
Where did I like the best? I do like the best in Honolulu. After that, I do like the best again in the Ringler Show in Madison Square Garden.
When you're not working, what do you like to do?
Working, I like to go on the cruise ships.
The sideshow would not have come to Breckenridge. What do you think you would have done with your life?
I was 24 years old. I didn't have no job. I didn't have no money. If I would have done that, and I don't know what to do in Breckenridge. I just stay in Breckenridge for the rest of my life, and I got no job. Yeah, that's a good thing I came to work in the sideshow. I've been with you quite a long time.
How do you feel when people look at you in the show?
I feel when people look at me in the show, they look at me, I feel real good.
Why?
And entertain them. Feel happy.
Okay. Now that the sideshow is closing, what are you going to do?
The sideshow is closing. And then I relax for a little while. And the show's ever opened again. And I join with them again. And Chris, been my family. Out for each other. I want to stay with them and the rest of my life.
Zenobia, or Jennifer. Zenobia is my sideshow name, and I'm from Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn, New York. He was brave enough to ask me over, come see the show, if I was interested in working there. So I said I'd try it out. So I tried it out. Lasted a week. Came back the next year, did the whole season. And that was how I began.
When did you discover you had a beard?
Well, my beard started growing in when I was around, first few hairs maybe when I was 17, but it took a good several years after that to be anything you could call a beard. But it came in, very slowly over the years, and it's still getting a little thicker.
And did you ever decided you wanted to remove it or to let it grow? Or?
I've removed it now and then for some very high-paying work. If I get a good gig that I'm interested in, good type of performing that I want to do, or that pays well, every once in a while, I'll take it off for a show. But that's because I know I'm going to let it grow back.
What do you like to do? What do you want to do in the future?
I want my circus company in New York, my small circus company, Circus Amok, to become a full-time circus company and tour it and do free shows in parks. And I'd like to keep working in the sideshow too, because it's very special work for me. I like doing it a lot.
My name is Zenobia, and I am a woman with a beard. Ouch. Now, you notice I'm calling myself a woman with a beard, not the bearded lady. Why is that? Anybody have any idea? All right, I'll tell you. If I called myself the bearded lady, I would be saying that Zenobia, for today, was the one, the only woman with a beard in the entire world. Could that possibly be true? The bearded lady? Of course not. The world is full of women who have beards, or at least they have the potential. Do you know what I'm saying, the potential? If only they would reach out and fulfill their potential, as I myself have so obviously done, instead of wasting the time, the money, the energy on the waxing, on the shaving, on the electrolysis, on that paint fluids, on the plucking. Okay, we all know someone who plucks, but it starts with a little pluck here, a little pluck there. All right. But the next thing you know, you got pluck, pluck, pluck. Well, then you are on a roll. You cannot stop. It is pluck, 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 as if these women were chicken. Forget it. Historically, hair has been a symbol of power. You have hair clubs for men, they all want it. It goes all the way back to Samson and his big mane of power. Power, that's why men don't want women having too much in too many places. People want to know how I deal on the street. I'm getting hassled out there. Well, I tell you, I do the usual things. I talk, I ignore, I run, I cajole, I educate, I chit-chat, what can I tell you? Long, hard day of work, I'm hot, I'm tired, forget the talking, forget the cajoling. All I want is a nice cold machete. Out there? Well, you know, if we had a goddamn national health care plan, I wouldn't have to ask the question now, would I? All right, help me concentrate. For the sake of the beautiful people. Right here in the front row. We want to keep them that way. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. So far, so good. But watch carefully as the blade leaves my right hand. Passes in between my left arm and the left side of my body, leaving only a quarter of an inch to spare on either side. Are you ready? Very good. Good. Here I go. And up. All right, so big deal. I can see you're an intelligent, discerning audience. I can see you'd like a little more for your money, you cheapskates. All right. I shall now, therefore, risk my life and your limbs. I mean, my life and limbs for your perverse pleasure. Take it home. Go ahead, Zenobia girl. Take it home. Okay, here I go. And up. Coming on, Bill. It goes. Up, 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 and sing.
Bobby Reynolds, the greatest showman in the world, next to Ward Hall. Actually, there are only two people left in this business, and we're kind of the dinosaurs that are left. Ward works mostly in the East. Now I've come to the East, but I'm working primarily in Coney Island. I'm not on the road in the East here. I have some shows out in the West, but the business is at an end. There's noisy rides, fun houses that are not so funny, and concessionaires, and that's what the fairs consist of anymore. They don't have any shows. Shows are great, and I think they're going to have a resurge. But what's going to happen? There's not going to be anyone around to pick up the gauntlet and run with it. There's not going to be other people that know about this. Ward is in his 60s, and I'm in my 60s. So who's left? Chris is young, but not as young. Not that young. He's in his 40s, so Chris probably would take over after Ward and I are up there cutting up jackpots with P.T. Barnum. We'll tell lies up in heaven. Watching this guy selling these things, and I seemed interested, and the guy says, "You think you could do this, kid?" So I put my shoe shine box underneath the stand, and I started to work the horn nuts. And a guy went across the street for a bowl of soup, he said, and there was a bar over there, which is probably what happened. I ended up selling the Chinese horn nuts, and I found out that the cop would come by and grab $3. That was the postman. And then the Mickey Mouse, which we called in those days, the patrol car would come by, and he'd grab another $3. So it was a $6 payoff for the day to work at 14th Street. And that's how I started. And then the guy said, "You want to be my helper?" And he said, "You didn't gross very much money." But I said, "Yeah, but the cops took $6. He said, "Oh, you made the rent." How I started. Then I started to buy some good magic at Al Flosso's. Al Flosso was my teacher in magic. And he also taught me how to make Punch and Judy whistles and slum packages of magic, which he used to make for some of the guys on the road.
When did you first work in a sideshow, and where?
I was 13 years old, and I worked on Hubert's Museum on 42nd Street, because I lied about my age. I told him I was 16 and a half, 17 years old.
And that was the indoor sideshow that was there for many, many years,
Yeah,
right?
It was downstairs in the basement of the Penny Arcade, and Roy Heckler with his trained fleas were there. And there's a very interesting person. When I was a real young lad, I used to hang around Hubert's, and he used to say to me, "Bobby, come here, go down to 9th Street and buy me some beef kidneys for, he used to raise Pomeranians. And he said, what are you afraid of me? And I used to be deathly afraid of him. He was, you know, with all this makeup and crap and one tit. And so I go down there. So he says, you know where 9th Street? Yes, yes, down there, and I'll get a beef kidneys. I understand. Chop them up. He says, on the way back, you stop by Honenhanens and you get me a great big coffee, 4 sugars, and get a little piece of something, a little Danish, you know. Used to say, boy changing to girl, and we used to pull the curtain, and Albert would be sitting there like this, you know, with that look, you know, and he'd stand up with these blue lights, and he used to spray this cubicle with a stage with perfume, and he'd stand up and he'd go, ladies and gentlemen, you look upon the stage, you say to yourself, that one, she looks like a man. I don't claim to be a man because I'm not a man. I don't claim to be a woman because I'm not a woman. I do have a claim to be a Mariel, and through hermaphrodite. And then he'd go on and on. Horn Nuts in Coney Island, and I worked there for a while, and then I got interested in the sideshows. I always liked sideshows. When I worked in Hubert's, I went to Coney Island, and I ended up working for Dave Rosen. I worked as an inside magician, and I worked as a blow-off opener. I used to work the openings and blow-offs. And then I went to work for Fred Sindel, which you ping-ponged yourself back and forth between these two guys. One would give you a raise, and then next year you'd work for the other one and give you a raise. So finally, I ended up as from the blow-off opening and doing magic inside, I ended up as a talker on the front. Road experience was before Coney Island, actually. I went with Dwight Purdon and Edith Purdon. Dwight was the handless wonder, and he had the sideshow over on Vivona Brothers. It was called Vivona Brothers in those days. And I was 14 years old when I went out on the road with them. So my early experience was under canvas before Coney Island. I was 17 years old. And there was a chap by the name of Artie Steinhardt. Artie Steinhardt he had sideshows up in Canada and stuff. And Artie Steinhardt was from Coney Island, and he finally talked me into being his partner, and he built the battle line and so forth. And we went out on the road with Artie Steinhardt. That was my first sideshow and first one I ever owned with another partner.
Was that the one where you had Aunt Jemima?
No, that was my own. That was with Milton Levine, who was a talker in Coney Island, and that was with myself. We were on the World of Mirth that year. Yeah, the 60s, the early 60s.
What was the story about the colored bearded lady?
Oh, Aunt Jemima? Well, Aunt Jemima had this great big pillows in her chest and had big pillows in her tushy. And she went up there and danced, and she had the bandana. She looked like Aunt Jemima, and she was a good ballet act, terrific ballet act. She used to take care of Kokomo, the mule face boy who I had on the road, and we had Johanna the Bear Girl out there. And so what happened is I had Barbeti, the bearded lady, which was a half and half, which was a female impersonator in the blow-off. So Barbeti, the bearded lady, screwed on me, took off, and I have no blow-off. So what I did is I said, Aunt Jemima, it says Carrie, her name was Carrie Adams. I said, Carrie, you're going to be a star. And she said, Mr. Bob, when you start talking like that, I know you're going to do something bad to me. And I said, no, all you have to do is sit all day and do nothing. You don't have to climb up and down those ballet stages. And she said, oh, well. So what happened is I put beer in her hair. That's before afros were in, and I had this great big afro hairdo on her, and then I put crepe hair, black crepe hair, all over her face, over her nose, under her eyes. She looked like a little gorilla. And from the neckline down, a beautiful, perfectly well-developed woman. But from the neckline up, she actually looks like an animal, half human. Her mother was normal. What was her father? These things will be explained inside. So that went on for a while. It was a good blow-off act, too. And we used to keep a silk scarf over her head, and she'd sit on the chair and sleep there most of the day. So it was very hot. We're playing the Dixie Classic Fair, and the crepe hair kind of fell down like this. And I said, and the hair grew out her face, and blah, 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 and then she went through life. And I pulled the scarf away, and there's this hunk of hair hanging down on one side, and I hold it up with my elbow, and I said, and this is the way she goes through life, ladies and gentlemen. And I threw the scarf back over her head again. And she starts bellowing at me. She says, Bobby, she says, me a black lady down here in the South, and you a New York Jew, we're going to die down here. They're going to kill us. They're going to kill us unless you put better glue on there. So I said, well, don't worry, Ken. She said, no, I ain't going to do this no more until you put better glue on. I said, what the hell am I going to get better glue? You know, use the spirit gum. So finally, the guy who was my canvas man, he said, why don't you put some of this brown bear, which was glue we used to fix the tents with. So I said, okay, I'll use this brown bear stuff. So I put the brown bear glue on, I stuck it up there, and it held very good. it held so good she couldn't get that stuff off at night, and she's pulling it off and putting alcohol on it. And what happened is she probably got an alcohol poisoning in her flesh, and her face swelled up this big, and her lips got awfully big. And now I have to take her to a doctor. And where the hell are you going to find a doctor in the middle of the deep south with a big Aunt Jemima coming along? So I finally find a doctor's office with, you know, an old plantation-looking place. And I go up and I knock on the door and I says, "Doctor, you're not going to believe this, but I have this woman that I had, a gorilla girl, and the hair was glued on, and we use this glue, blah, blah." He says, "Bring her in here, son. I've got to see this myself." So we bring him in there and put it down there, and he looks at it and he says, my, I've never seen a worse case of glue, alcoholic poisoning in my life. He said, "Well, I'm going to give you this stuff and put it on there, but you know, I wouldn't be doing this for another at least 4 or 5 days, and don't use any more of that tent glue, because it's not good for the skin." And then he kind of laughed at me, and we went back to the lot.
What are you doing these days now, since the sideshow business is really defunct?
Well, the sideshow business, as we know it, is not really defunct. What's happened is the carnivals are defunct because they don't want sideshow acts. By the time you give up all the percentages and so forth, by the time you move this equipment down the road, and by the time you pay good acts, there's not enough dollars left. So what I've done is I have a great big museum in Coney Island. I make as much money, but I don't work as hard, and I grow old gracefully. And upstairs we have a nice apartment, my wife and I, Ruth. We have a nice apartment there, and that's what I'm doing basically. And then Katie is my wife, Strong Reynolds.
And I know that it's awfully hard for you to get in at word edgewise when Ward and Bobby are talking. But would you tell me a little bit about yourself and your...
With once in a while with little kiddie rides, and he invented many rides and built them, and he asked us to take one of them on the other side of the redwoods, which was Eureka, and deliver it for him. Since we needed the money at the time for gas and for everything else, we took him up on it. And it was then, on the way up, that John Strong told me he always wanted to own a circus, and I said, "Why don't you?" He said, "There is a stigma against it." And I said, "Nonsense. Nobody gives you respect, you earn it." So he said, "Do you mean that?" We went up through the redwoods, passed through them, delivered that little train in Eureka, came back. The only time we stopped was for a Coca-Cola. And then all I saw was the tree that you drive a car through in the redwoods. And we came right back to Burbank on parade, picked up a 13-year-old boy and Uncle Bill Dietrich, who had 4 ponies and a high-diving dog. We made Dave a clown, and that's how we started our circus.
Thank you, Ruth.
Michigan, and at the early age left home, joined the circus, started out working around elephants, gradually worked up to doing more around them, went into working around canvas around circuses, and then I drifted over into carnival sideshows with some of the old carnival sideshow people like J.T. Hutchins Modern Museum and some of those old timers. Then I went around a guy by the name of McNeese, and we was in the thrill show business, and back into the circus business. I left the circus business and went to work. I went to work for C.M. Chris in the sideshow business on the carnival. Worked there for many years. Took out my own sideshow at the wrong time. Didn't make a very good success with business-wise. Then I went into doing my act in parks, such things as that. To the present time, where I play different stage shows from time to time, different special events for the acts that I do. Home sideshow, Ward Hall convinced me to go over on to the last sideshow the Ringling Show had with him and worked for him there. Stayed working for him for quite some time. Then I left the sideshow business because of other things. Went to work doing stage shows and smaller performances such as that to the present time. And during that time, I run across Alexandria when I was working a thing at the Orange Show. And after a while, we got married, and she's been my assistant ever since.
And now let's talk to Alexandra. And Alexandra, tell us, how did this fella ever convince you to become his human target in the knife-throwing act, and then you learned how to walk barefooted on red-hot coals?
Well, he doesn't have to convince me of anything because I know how to do anything. He just tells me he wants me to do it, and I do it. I can do anything he wants me to do.
You weren't originally in show business, though?
No, I was not.
But you evidently like it because you're very good at it.
Well, thank you.
What?
I was with the bands more or less before.
What would you like to do in the future? Both of you.
Well, I want Johnny to be a real star, like the best.
Well, that sounds great. And if Johnny's a big star, he's going to have Alexandra right there with him because she's going to be a star too.
You believe that?
I sure do.
Started to gain weight at a very quick and rapid rate. If this rapid weight gain goes on unabated, as is expected, in a period of 4 to 5 years, he could weigh over 1,200 pounds to be in the World Book of Records as the world's largest man.
Structure called the hypothalamus, and that I do like to eat. My father's held his weight down to 300 pounds all his life. When I do that, you know, he has literally crucified himself on a diet. If it cuts 10, 20 years off my life, I'd rather have, I'd rather have 50 happy years than 70 miserable ones.
This morning for breakfast, he had 2 dozen eggs, 2 pounds of bacon, 6 stacks of hotcakes, a gallon of orange juice, a pot of coffee, 4 strawberry shortcakes, but he wasn't very hungry.
Well, as we are getting ready for the final performance of the sideshow before it closes for, I guess, forever, I'm sitting here with one of my featured attractions, and this is a man who I'm very pleased to call my friend. He has been with us now for, what, how many years?
Let's see, I started in 74. I started in 74, so it'd be just about exactly 20 years. Howard Hughes, spelled the same as the other guy's name, but without the money. I grew up and was raised in Boston. College at Boston University, where I majored in paleobotany and paleozoology and got degrees in those two subjects. I was working at a dig out in North Dakota, but I mean, it simply was a little bit too strenuous for me. So one fine day while I was poking around the Jamestown library, I came upon this old picture of a circus sideshow, and I noticed the fat man in that picture was somewhat smaller than I am. So I asked the librarian if they had any list of trade journals, figuring that the carnival industry probably had some sort of trade journal. She gave me one. I looked through this book, came upon the name of the newspaper, Amusement Business. I wrote the editor asking if he knew about any sideshows. Now, it just so happened it was a sheer coincidence that Tom Powell, the editor of AB, is a good friend of C.M. Christ. And he gave me C.M. Christ's phone number and address, and I wrote him. And the rest is history. I had a job in 2 weeks.
Chris changed your last name from Hughes to Huge, right?
Yeah.
For the purpose
obvious reasons.
Yeah. So, Harold Huge, the fattest man in show business. So, 20 years now you've been in the show business.
Yeah.
And evidently you like it. You wouldn't have stayed in it.
Yes. Every summer I come north, New York and New England, and sometimes into Canada. And every winter we go back down into Florida. While places we were doing are buried under a couple of yards of snow. No business. I've got a fishing boat, which I use to fish in the Keys during the winter. Now that the sideshow business is ending, I'll probably fish down around the Keys during the winter, then head up around Cape Cod and George's Bank during the summer.
Something would happen that the sideshow would revive, or that we would end up with a permanent museum. Which would you rather do? Go back with the sideshow or continue with the fishing boat?
The fishing boat would go on the blocks in about 2 seconds. I mean, I like fish, but cleaning the things is not my favorite chore.
Well, obviously you haven't missed any meals in the 20 years of the sideshow.
No.
What did you weigh when you was a kid?
Kindergarten, I weighed about 100 pounds. By the time I reached junior high, I was up to about 250. When I was in college, then I really ballooned from about 400 to about 600.
That's about what you weighed then when you first came on the show?
Yes.
About 600. And what do we consider your weight now?
About 712, 710, you know. It's in the, say, between 710 and 720.
Are your parents and siblings also very heavy, or?
Well, some of my relatives are fairly heavy. I had a grandfather, great-grandfather, actually, I suspect, won about 800 pounds.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
Yes.
So you come by it kind of naturally.
Yes.
Okay, it's almost showtime, so let's do that last final show. Thank you.
C.M. Christ, and for the last 28 years I've been partnered with Ward Hall in various ventures across the country, most notably the circus sideshow business, which unfortunately
is an indigenous American art form which is now faded into the past. When I was 14 years of age, I basically ran away from home to join the circus with my parents' permission, which is a little unusual for a young boy running away from home to join the circus. I did it basically as a summer job in between going to school, and I joined Dub Dugan's Hagen Wallace Circus, where Andy Osak was the concession manager, and Bill Hill had the candy wagons, and I became very close friends with Alan Hill and his brothers. We kind of hung out together at that point because we were all the same age. And of course, Alan is a big-time circus producer today, but yet we still keep our friendship that we've developed over all these years and see each other quite often. Before I graduated from high school, I took my Easter vacation and worked for Ward Hall at Madison Square Garden with the Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus in the basement in the sideshow. And that was my first exposure to performing. And during the years, I've swallowed swords, threw knives, fired, trained chimpanzees. One of the favorite things that I've done in life when I look back is I had one chimp that was marvelously talented and had a marvelous disposition, unlike many of them, as some of you folks watching this video will know. His name was Tobias, and he could do anything. As the company grew and I no longer used him, he was getting unhappy because he enjoyed performing, and I sold him to a fellow that had George Carden's elephants. And unbeknownst to me, this gentleman was dying of leukemia, and I had sold him to this gentleman only because he took wonderful care of his animals. Probably would have gave this gentleman the chimpanzee because I wanted him to have a good home. After I had sold my chimpanzee Tobias, about a year and a half later, we were in Las Vegas entertaining the fair committee from the State Fair of Texas in Dallas. And the opening act was Jerry Van Dyke, and he did a dueling banjo routine. And during the dueling banjo routine, out came a chimp, and just by slight mannerisms that can't be described, Ward looked at me and I looked at him, and he said, "That's Tobias." And I said, "You're damn right it is." And Tobias had made the big time playing Las Vegas, and we were still on the carnival. Fortunate that when I did break into the carnival industry and show portion of the carnival business, that it was just the beginning of the end. And just to show that when I was 18 years of age, I was the youngest operator in the business. I'm now 46, and I'm still the youngest operator in the business. And I feel very fortunate that I was trained and broke in by some of the greats in the carnival back-end show business, such as T.W. Kelly, Whitey Sutton, Glenn Porter, Harry Fee, and on and on. I was a young, ambitious kid, and they all kind of took to me and took me under the wing. Al Moody, I can't go on without mentioning Al, who is a great mentor of mine. Throughout my career, I've had the pleasure of playing every major fair in the United States and Canada. Also, various circuses, primarily with sideshows and other attractions, such circuses as Toby Tyler, Circus Vargas, Circus USA, and the last giant sideshow with Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. We also had a show with Ringling Brothers at the Permanent Park in Haines City when that existed. And an interesting point on Circus USA, it was a circus on 8 trucks. It sat 2,500 people. It had a 90 with a 50, 14 high blues. We used to call it the lumber yard. And we built it from scratch, 32 days. In fact, it was such an impossible task that they were taking bets in Sarasota that we wouldn't make opening day.
Whose circus was it?
Allen Hills Circus USA. As far as my future plans, for over 4 years now I've been involved with Turner Broadcasting, doing marketing for World Championship Wrestling all over the country. I'm now forming a marketing company called Promotional Corporation of America, in which we're going to provide promotional and marketing services to sporting events, fairs, carnivals, and circuses throughout the nation. Now that we come to the end of an era, I feel a little heaviness of heart after spending so many years to keep this art form alive. And through all these years, I look back and I have done so many things, and I've been blessed to do so many things. I have so many fond memories, but like all good things, I guess I must come to an end. And it is time to move on to other things. I move on with no regrets, just fond memories.
I gotta say what he caught. It's Michael Wilson, and I am the Illustrated Man. I started getting tattoos when I was around 13 years old in Northern California, an area called Marin County, about an hour north of San Francisco. Started getting them at an illegal age, but I just kept knocking on this one tattooist door, and he finally let me in. And from there it started. And as I say in the monologue that I do at the sideshow, tattoos are just like potato chips. You can't have just one. I like it. I live in New York City now. I've been in New York City for the last 13 years, and I've been working at the sideshow, as I just made mention, for the last 10 years. I do pain-proof acts, lie on a bed of nails, and I look for the biggest guy to come up and stand on top of me while I lie on a bed of nails. And I also do an iron tongue act, where I hammer a nail right through my tongue. From here, I want to do a bunch of different things. I'd like to do more music videos. I'd like to do more movies, things like that. I'd also like to paint banners, try my hand at that. I'm a fairly good painter, and I'd like to try that. But I've been enjoying being here.
How did you first connect with the sideshow?
I was working as a bartender, and a guy in New York City, and a guy came up to me and was getting friendly with me, and he said that they were looking for strange and unusual looking people at the sideshow. I mean, since I was a kid, I've always wanted to work in sideshows and circuses. So I went and applied myself, got my tattooed face, and saw that I could definitely draw a tip. And so that's when it started. And he would take me outside. I would show an arm or I'd show a leg, and he would say that my entire head, face, and neck is covered with tattoos, and that drew people in. And so that's what happened. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Michael Wilson, and I am the Illustrated Man. I'm called the Illustrated Man because of the many tattoos you see on my shoulders, on my chest, on my ribs, on my arms, on my hands, on my legs, and on my head, face, and neck. The tattoos that you see took hundreds of hours of work done by some of the top tattooists. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of people ask me this one basic question. Does getting tattoos hurt? Well, for myself, it hurt me on the bone area, the elbow, the ribs. But since I started getting them when I was a kid, I learned a technique of controlling the pain going into this man's brain. I'd like to illustrate this doing a pain-proof act. Well, you get a hammer, and you get a nail. It's hammer time. Tastes delicious.
Well, here we are all gathered together on the Reithoffer's Carnival Midway in Pee Wee Hoskins Cookhouse to have our farewell dinner. The final performances ended, and everybody now is relaxed and going to enjoy some good food. And it is a pleasure to have them all here. And every one of these people has been so important to me in my lifetime, and our relationships go back for many, many years. This may be the last time that some of us will see each other. Certainly it's probably the last time we'll all of us get together again.
In Georgia, Perry, Georgia, making a film into the greatest showman in the East.
And everybody, of course, in good spirits. Bobby holding court at his table as usual. And anyway, I do think...
I met C.M. Chris is quite a story in itself. I think it was 1964 in the winter. The amusement business, for the only time, to my knowledge, published a listing of all of the independent carnival showmen and what shows they had, and a name and an address and so on. And Chris had been with Dub Dugan's little circus, and he wanted to be in the sideshow business. And so he told me that he wrote to everybody on that list that had sideshows, and so it ended up that we corresponded. And I offered him a job. He could do magic. Could he eat fire then already?
No.
No?
Not at that point.
But he did magic anyway, and take his Easter vacation from high school and come on into New York City, because Easter week with the Ringling Show at Madison Square Garden was always our biggest week. And I always needed somebody extra there. He was a great help there. But anyway, that was his introduction to the show business. He got started at the top at Madison Square Garden. Chris agreed to join us after he got out of school that year. And I had the show at with a carnival at Maywood Racetrack in Maywood, Illinois, part of Chicago. Sent me a telegram, which I never got.
When no one picked me up, I took a bus, and I arrived at a carnival that had just been hit by a windstorm the night before. There's pieces laying all over, and I have 2 suitcases in my hand, and I ask where Ward Hall is, and nobody knows, never heard of him. Now I go down toward the back end, and I find a pile of rubble laying on the ground. And that was my introduction to Ward Hall's outdoor operation.
And I believe if you would have had money in your pocket, you probably would have turned around and gone back home then, wouldn't you?
That's very true.
Yeah, we had got hit late at night, the night before, by a storm, and the sideshow had blown down. I had a broken leg, and I'm hobbling around there on crutches with a cast, and I had Tiny Hicks, the fat man, and Little Pete, and whoever else, they were out there and sewing on the tent, trying to get it back so we could get back in business. And that was Chris's day to arrive on the show. But I got to say, I never saw anybody who was more ambitious, who worked harder than Chris did. And over the years, there's things he did that I look back now and think, gee, they were impossible. The conditions sometimes that he moved the show under and built things with deadlines that he met, drove trucks day and night without sleep and so on back in those days.
John Trower and I, known to most people in the circus business as Little Red, was our superintendent for almost 20 years. And he's now moved to San Antonio, Texas, where he works out of San Antonio and does amusement parks. But him and I were talking on the phone. We were talking about some of these crazy deadlines we'd met and crazy moves we've made. And Red said, now that we're getting a little older, he said, I wonder how in the hell we did it. And I said, that's not the question. The question is, why in the hell did we do it?
Always the show must go on, and we go out and sometimes risk life and limb and equipment to do things. And was it you, Askell Old Staff, who booked all of the shows at the Texas State Fair for many years?
Lowell, I said, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to sound ludicrous, but I need a definite answer. And he said, go ahead, what's the question? I said, if I died tomorrow, would they have a fair in Dallas next year? He said, why, of course. I said, well, that's all I wanted to know. So how important was it?
Yeah. Makes my 46th season, 46 years of operating sideshows. And Chris, how many years have you been in operating?
28 years of operating my own show with you, of course.
And it's been struggles and triumphs and good times and bad, but overall, I have to say that I guess the sideshow business has treated us pretty good. But it's like showboats, minstrel shows, and circus concerts, and separate tented menageries and street parades. They're wonderful, but the era has passed. And I think now the sideshow business is past too. The last of the 10-in-1 sideshows that still existed in the carnival business. There are none on the circus now with the big independent sideshows. And so with the passing of this one, there is no more sideshow now.
A statement from Red Skeleton as we close this tape and close an era and say good night and may God bless.